God is good, and with each day that passes brings us a day closer to the launch of Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. This is the Nathan Napalm channel, and if you're new here, please consider subscribing, especially if you're interested in Pantheon related content, MMORPGs, JRPGs, RPGs, all that kind of thing. Today guys, we are going to be breaking down everything that we know currently about the Ranger. This is going to be the ability list as far as we know. Now it is not a complete ability list, but it gives us a very good idea of what the Ranger will be and what it will be like to play one, especially at lower levels. Now before we begin, I do want to give a big shout out to the members of Napalm. Thank you so much for keeping the lights on, keeping me in business. Appreciate you guys so much. And if you're interested in becoming a member of Napalm, please click the join button down below for more information and a list of perks. Would truly appreciate it. Now guys, let's talk about the Ranger. The wilds of Terminus call to Rangers, drawing them deeper into its mysteries. It is in those untamed regions of the world that Rangers are forged into versatile and ferocious warriors, united with the land and animals they commune with. The Ranger excels at both melee and ranged combat, able to weave between the two with elegant ease. In close combat, Rangers prefer the use of one-hand weapons over two-handed, able to deliver devastating damage with swift precision. When the Ranger chooses to withdraw from close quarters combat, they can masterfully employ bows and crossbows to inflict lethal ranged damage, restrain enemies, illuminate their environment, set traps, or flee from danger. Their group role is damage, their combat resources are endurance and momentum, and their available armors are cloth, light and heavy leather, as well as chain. And their available weapons are dagger, short spear, sword, great sword, edged, great blade, axe, club, warhammer, mace, longbow, short bow, and crossbow. Now I think it's very interesting to note that although in the description for Ranger specifically says they prefer to use one-handed weapons, Pantheon does not limit you to where you can only use one hand. You can use two hand if you prefer. And I think that's pretty interesting and of note. The available races that you can play as Ranger are Elf, of course, Halfling, and Human. At least at the time of this recording, there could be more added, but for now, it is those three races. And although I think a Halfling Ranger would look really freaking cool, I do believe the Elf will have the advantage here, but we'll just have to wait and see. Now let's talk a little bit about their abilities. Now before I begin, I have to say again, this is not a complete ability list to max level. This is just to give us an idea, a sneak peek, an understanding of what the Ranger can be. And also, it's worth noting that some of these abilities could get better or more things added to them, etc. as you level up and as you unlock more in the world, etc. Now let's get started though. Number one, we have Velguard's Stride. This is a passive ability that basically makes the Ranger's movement speed increased while they're outdoors. So Rangers obviously familiar with terrain and things like that. When you're outside, you can move faster as a Ranger, which I think is really cool. Next up, we have Silent Arrow. This is where the Ranger carefully aims a shot that impels an enemy, dealing high physical damage. If the enemy is under the effect of your traps, Silent Arrow will critically hit. This ability can be manually aimed for increased damage. Now that's what I found really interesting, is that if you take the time to manually aim, you will get better damage, and also that kind of disadvantage if you have them under a trap, you are guaranteed that crit hit, which is going to be a big deal and something you're going to have to pay attention to. And then imagine that they're in a trap, so you get the crit hit, but also you manually aim, so it's an increased damage crit hit. You can really do a lot of damage with this. Next up, we have Engage. The Ranger leaps into the fray to engage an enemy in melee combat, granting initiative, which guarantees your next melee ability will critically hit. So here we go again with initiative, aka advantage, giving you that crit hit, and Engage is how you'll actually jump into the battle to get in some melee hits. After you fire some rounds, you get some good shots off your arrow, dive in there and get some melee hits in. And I believe this is how you will be balancing what is called momentum, which is part of your combat resources, is by weaving back and forth between melee and ranged. Next up, we have Bright Fire Sap. This is where the Ranger coats their weapon in bright fire sap, turning it into a light source. So can you save up the sap in your inventory so that you can have some on the go, or do you have to be near a tree or something to do it? We'll have to wait and see, but I like that because in Pantheon, in a deep dark dungeon, you're going to need a light source. Somebody's going to need a torch or some kind of magical ability, something so that you can see, which is very Dungeons and Dragons, and I always like that. It looks like the ranger will have the ability, as long as they have that sap, to do that. Next up, we have Withdrawal. So this is where the ranger kicks off of an enemy, vaulting backwards and granting advantage, once again, which guarantees your next range ability will crit hit. So as you can see the pattern here, lay a trap, which we're going to get to those in a minute, silent arrow for that high physical damage, aim it if you want even more, and if they're under that trap, you get a crit hit. Then you can leap into the fray, do a melee combat, get advantage there, get a crit hit, then withdraw away from the enemy, vaulting backwards, getting back out to range, get the advantage again, and get another crit hit. So the ranger is the crit hit champion so far out of all of the classes, in my opinion. Anyway, let's keep moving forward. Next, we have Kalen's Charge. This is where the ranger commands an animal's trust, immediately ending combat and making the animal friendly towards you for a short time. So you can get an animal pet for a little while, as long as obviously the thing you're attacking is an animal and not something else, then you can make that your friend for a while. Next up, we have Fractal Arrow. This is where the ranger fires an arrow that shatters on impact, dealing physical damage and causing the enemy to bleed. So we have some damage over time with Fractal Arrow. Very nice, going to be a big deal in racking up big points on the DPS meters. You know, obviously probably won't be meters, but you know what I mean. Stacking up that damage. Next up, we have Beckon, Grizzly. This is cool because this is where the ranger beckons a grizzly bear to attack an enemy for a short duration, dealing physical damage to an enemy and stunning them briefly. So if you watch a lot of streams, you've probably seen this, where a bear comes into the net for an attack and stuns the enemy. Very cool ability, and definitely something that I look forward to seeing rangers do because it's cool. Next up, we have Beckon Veilhawks. This is where the ranger beckons a pair of Veilhawks to carry you to a nearby location, but it cannot be used in combat. So this is one of those exploration type things where maybe you can get across a cliff or something like that. And once again, I love these exploration things, and I'm glad to see the ranger get something like that because they're very dealing with nature and all that kind of thing. So summoning some hawks so that you can get to a nearby location, I think that's cool, and I can't wait to see the animation and see that in action. I think that's awesome. Next up, we have Hamstring Trap. So here's a trap. This is where the ranger sets a hamstring trap that snares the first enemy to approach, reducing their movement speed. Now, if, once again, like I said before, if you set this trap, then do silent arrow, then you actually get a crit hit on your silent arrow because they're trapped. Plus, they're moving slower, so you got more time to line that up. And keep in mind, you can do increased damage with the arrow shot, with the silent arrow, if you aim it manually, and if they're slowed, that buys you a little bit of time to get some increased damage. Next up, we have Weighted Bolt. This is where the ranger fires a heavy, blunted bolt at an enemy with enough force to knock them back a short distance. It puts the enemy in an off-balance state. So you get them in that off-balance state, you also get some damage, and it's a knockback. So I love these knockbacks because, you know, you can knock them off a cliff or what have you and really get an advantage in a fight that might have otherwise been very difficult. And I think we'll see some rangers do some pretty, I think any class that can do a knockback, you typically see some really cool emergent gameplay kind of stuff happening. Next up, we have Flare. This is where the ranger launches a burning arrow that sticks into the ground at target location, acting as a torch for a short time. So now we have a way where the ranger could just kind of shoot a torch in the middle of a room, light it up a little bit, and you say, oh crap, there's a ton of mobs down there, a ton of dead bodies. We're not going down there. Okay, it's a little dangerous, right? So once again, a little exploration, gives you a little vision into the scenario before you just trek into there and die, and plus a little further sight, right? Like be able to see a little further than you could with a torch or something like that. You can shoot it out further and get a good ground for what's going on and get your bearings. Next up, we have Ferocious Assault. This is where the ranger unleashes a flurry of rapid strikes with both weapons, inflicting multiple rounds of physical damage. Take that as you will. Both damage, dual wield, probably not. Pretty sure it meant your bow and your sword. How you switch back and forth between that quickly, I don't know, but a flurry of rapid strikes of both weapons. It could mean dual wield, although it specifically doesn't say that, but it kind of does. Okay, what I mean by that is it did say rangers prefer the use of one-hand weapons. You could say, well, it could mean daggers or swords, right? Or whatever. Or it could mean that you have two weapons in your hand at once and they dual wield. I don't really know. I think it would be cool if they could dual wield and they come in for the attack, they put their bow up, they, pull out two small swords and start really slashing away at it or whatever. I think it'd be cool. We'll have to wait and see as they announce it or as that's no longer under NDA, etc. But it sounds really cool, and I think the Ranger's very well rounded off. I do believe the launch Ranger of Pantheon is going to be much better than the launch Ranger in EverQuest. No offense to people who played that class, right? No, don't mean nothing by it. I'm just saying I think it's going to be better. The potential for crit hits is off the chain here. I can see a lot of ways you could weave in and this isn't even the full ability list, but even with what we have here, you can kind of see some combo potential here, right? Which I talked about, so no reason to repeat it, but I do believe that there's a lot there, and I really like some of this exploration with the flare and with the bell hawks being able to kind of almost teleport, move across maybe a gap or a cliff or something like that. And of course, the bright side sat being able to become a light source, right, with your weapon. I think all that's really cool. I think this is a good class. I think they're doing the Ranger justice. If you're planning on playing the Ranger, please let me know in the comments down below. And of course, what you're most excited about or how you think these abilities will affect the Ranger. Let me know. And guys, thank you so much for joining me. I'm wrapping up, finishing up the rest of my class guides here on the channel. Hope you'll join me for the rest of them. I have a lot already out, so if you haven't seen those, go ahead and do it. And of course, I have a huge playlist of Pantheon related information, over 150 videos of me talking about all kinds of various features and things about Pantheon, so please go check that out as well. Can entertain you for many days, if not weeks or months. And before I go, guys, I want to give a big shout out to the members of Napalm. Thank you so much for supporting this channel. Could not do this without you. And if you're interested in becoming a member, please click the join button down below for more information and a list of perks. And until next time, guys, God bless and happy gaming. Please listen to what I say. I've been making videos all day. It's a video buffet, you can even hit replay. But please just subscribe. I can't even describe being part of my tribe. I'll even offer you a prize, but please just subscribe and hit the bell notification too.